What is up, guys? Welcome to the Edge DFS. My name is Tyson Smith. I'm riding solo today because we're going to be talking about League of Legends DFS, specifically LPL and LCK leagues. Those are the Chinese and the Korean league. Now look, if I've already scared you away from this video because you don't know anything about League of Legends, the game, who the teams are, who the players are, honestly, neither did I, and I still don't know anything about actually playing the game. The good news is, when it comes to DFS, there's a handful of strategies that if you follow and you pay attention, you should be able to win a decent amount and possibly a couple first places here and there. The key is going to be stacking and doing however many lineups your bankroll will allow you to play. Try to get it in as many combinations as humanly possible. So typically we have either a 4-game slate, which is both LPL and LCK leagues sort of together on the same slate, or we'll have a 2-game slate, which is just LPL. Now, LPL is typically like, that's the major leagues as far as they have the best teams, the highest scoring teams, and LCK is still pretty good, but you're going to notice that the amount of kills that are projected for these teams are a little bit less, and typically speaking, you're going to get a little bit less scoring from these teams. So like I said, even if you don't know anything about League of Legends, it's okay. We're going to get through this together. By the end of this show, you should be able to enter lineups tonight in tonight's slate. And we're actually going to talk about the teams and some strategies for tonight, but overall, that will translate into pretty much every slate. The key here is finding your process and doing that same process every single night. And over time, you're most likely going to be profiting. So let's just jump right into this. All right, so I'm pulling up the Draftkings rules and scoring here. So this is kind of like, the way that this is laid out is kind of like a hybrid showdown and just like a regular slate. So you do have a captain position with the same rules that you would typically have in any other showdown slate, where you pay 1.5 times the salary for that captain, as well as you score 1.5 times the points for that captain. As well as you have 6 other positions, one of which is a team that you would choose. And then you have these different positions here. So you have top laner, jungler, mid, ADC, support, and team. Now this can seem a little bit overwhelming at first if you've never played this game or you have no clue how to do it. There's certain things you need to keep an eye on here when it comes to these positions. When it comes to captain, we want to target ADC and mid if we can, but sometimes we're going to be forced to play some jungler and maybe the top laner, or even maybe some support. Now, support typically is going to score you the least amount of points, and mid and ADC typically are going to be your highest scoring players. Now, what we want to focus on is targeting teams and stacking teams that have the highest probability of completing a sweep. So if we have a best of 3, which we typically do on these type of slates, you're going to want to target teams that you think have the best chance of sweeping the other team. So getting 2 straight wins, because here's what happens. You actually end up getting bonuses. You get a 20-point bonus for your players, and if you rostered that team in the team spot for games not played. So if you get a sweep, you'll get an extra 20 points per player. So you're trying to target, and this is why stacking is so important, because if you find that team and you do a 4-3 stack, which is probably going to be typically what you want to aim for, or you can do a 4-2-1, and we'll get into that here in a second. If you have 4 players from the team that sweeps, you're getting an additional 80 points on top of that. And if you have them at captain, you'd get 90 points. So we want to focus on teams that can sweep. The less amount of games played typically is what's going to help us. So I'm not going to focus too much on the scoring. Let's just get right into tonight's slate so I can start giving you guys some examples. All right. So we have 4 games tonight. Now here is the tough part about this. These games start on the East Coast at 3 a.m. and can go all the way to the point where you're waking up for work in the morning. So West Coast definitely has the advantage. Now we need to talk about the difference between LCK and LPL. So LPL obviously they're going to be more popular teams when it comes to ownership typically, because they're projected for higher amount of kills. Therefore, their median projection is going to be a little bit higher. But The biggest difference between the LCK and the LPL is the LPL announces their starters earlier in the day. So you can build lineups at a reasonable hour for your LPL games. But the problem you're going to run into is LCK releases their starters an hour before lock. So if you're on the East Coast, you're going to have to stay up till 2 a.m. to confirm that first match, which in this case is Dragon X versus Sandbox, we're not going to know who's actually starting until about 2 a.m. And you got to be on Twitter. You got to be in the Discord. By the way, you can join our free Discord, and we're going to be talking more about League of Legends throughout the season. But you're going to have to be plugged into following certain people so that you know who's starting. This, in my opinion, is the hardest part about League of Legends DFS, is it happens overnight. I can't even tell you how many times I've woken up and looked at my phone and winning $1,000 or winning $300 or winning $20, whatever it is. You wake up and you win first place, but you split it with 50 other people or something like that. It's exciting. You get to wake. You don't really need to pay attention. You just wake up and you either won money or you didn't, which is kind of nice. There's not really a sweat unless you wake up really early. But honestly, when I watch League of Legends, I don't really know what the hell's going on most of the time anyways. So when it's a 2-game slate, which 2-game slates are usually just LPL, you can build before you go to bed, build at a reasonable hour because we know who's starting. Once again, LCK games, we will not know until an hour before that match starts. So here's the thing. The Freaks here versus T1, they're not going to release their lineups till 5 a.m. Eastern time. So a strategy that you should employ is to avoid playing the players from that last game, because unless you absolutely know who's going to start, unless you're like really, really hip to the starters, this is the beginning of the year, so I'm not going to risk it. You would basically only want to focus on choosing the team in the team spot from this last game. So you don't necessarily have to worry about potentially having a bunch of dead lineups because one player that you started was not starting. So these two middle games here, one starts at 4 a.m., the other starts at 6 a.m. Those are the LPL games, and the first and last games are the LCK games. So if you can stay up until 2 a.m. Eastern time to confirm the lineups, you can absolutely go heavy on this first game. And if there was any lineup changes, there's going to be a lot of dead lineups, and you could take advantage of that. If you can't do that, it's okay. You could still target these middle LPL games that you know the lineups of, and then focus in the team, do a 4-2-1 stack where you pop the team from these LCK games in the team spot. So it looks here like Top Esports is a huge favorite along with LNG Esports. Some of the most popular stacks will probably be a 4-3 with Top Esports and LNG together. That's just right by looking at this, you can already tell that most likely that's going to be the most popular stacks. Now, I make this up every night for these slates as best as I possibly can, and I go to pinnacle.com. This is an overseas sports book that covers esports. Now, there may be more books that are covering League of Legends, but right now, this is the one I've been using for the past year and a half, 2 years, or whatever it's been. So I'm going to continue to just use this. But if you're using an optimizer or you're signed up for projections from these different sites, the odds will reflect the projections. So a team like Top Esports, their players are most likely going to have some of the highest projections, along with LNG. So you don't really need to look at this stuff, but I personally want to see the odds so that I can kind of see where the field is most likely going to be. And also I can kind of try to figure out if I want to have any stacks with these heavy underdogs. So this helps by looking at this stuff. All you got to do, if you're interested in doing this yourself and checking out the odds, go to esports. On the top, you'll end up seeing leagues. You'll go down to LPL or LCK, and you can click into each of these matches here to see the odds. Rare Atom plus 415, Top Esports minus 579. But let's forget about the odds and everything for now. Let's get into actually building lineups. So I'm in Fantasy Cruncher right now. If you don't have an optimizer, it might be a little bit difficult for you to do a ton of lineups. Like I said, I want to have as many different combinations of teams and players as humanly possible. So ideally, I'm entering, 2 or 3 or 4 20 maxes, or I'm entering a mini max, getting 150 lineups, as many lineups as I possibly can. So here you could see next to these names, there's a yellow dot. That just means that the starters have not been released. As the day goes along, these 2 games here, as you saw in my Excel sheet there, these 2 games should have green next to them, because those starters will be confirmed, because those are the LPL starters. You'll see here, the first matchup will stay yellow, and the last matchup will stay yellow. You look over here, these are the different positions: top laner, jungler, mid, ADC, support, and team. Now, obviously, we're seeing all P's next to these names, but eventually you'll start to see some green and then some yellow. So let's talk about stacking here a little bit. First off, you never want to game stack. Typically speaking, you want to avoid playing players from the same game from opposing teams. So you would never want to have a top esports stack with a player from Rare Atom. You're going to want to avoid that, typically speaking. Now, there's some 2-game slates that you can do that to be a little bit different. You can do a 4-2-1 stack where the 2 and the 1 come from the same match. But on 4-game slates, there's never a reason to have a game stack. You always want to find one team and stack with a team from another match. So 4-3 stacks, 4-2-1 stacks are what you want to target. And as you start to play this more, you could find other different combinations of stacks. You want to put the captain with the 4 stack. Now, sometimes you can do it with the 3 stack. I'm typically not setting rules where I have to have the captain in the 4 stack, but more times than not, the captain's usually in that 4 stack. So which position should we be targeting to have in the captain spot? There's a couple that you never want to have in the captain spot. For me, support is one of the lowest scoring positions. You're gonna want to avoid playing support in the captain as much as possible. Now, sometimes you can't avoid it on certain slates. On 2-game slates, sometimes the salary constrictions with the 2 popular teams, if there's 2 heavy favorites, Draftkings is going to price all those players up to where it makes it very difficult to stack those 2 teams together without putting a support or a top in the captain. Top laner, you're most likely not going to want to target them at captain. The 2 positions you want to try to focus on are mid and ADC. You can get some jungler at captain, depending on the matchup or the slate or the player or the projection. But typically speaking, I want to try to find mids and ADCs for my captain position. Another thing you never want to do is put your team in the captain spot. Don't do it. When we're talking about a best of 3, you'll never see a team in the captain spot being the optimal. So let's look at some rules I like to set here. So let's go to advanced settings. Now, I'm not going to mess with the unique players, and I'm not going to mess with offensive players versus the team position. Like I said, you're going to want to keep this at 0 unless it's a 2-game slate and you think you want to do a 4-2-1 stack. But I usually don't mess with this. What I want to do is go into team stacks here, and I'm going to have a 4-player stack and a 3-player stack. Now, like I said, it depends on the stack you want to do. If you want to do a 4-2-1, which are very popular on 4-game slates, you can absolutely do that. But for the sake of this, I'm going to show you a 4-3 stack. So for the 4 stack, I'm not going to do any settings. I'm going to go ahead and crunch this just to kind of see where the field most likely is going to be. So I set up a 4 stack, I set up a 3 stack, and I'm going to make sure I have some rules to where I cannot have players from the same team playing against each other. So stack captain with at most 0 of all the positions from the opposing team, and then you can do that with the team as well to try to help you out there. Or you can come in to general and you can limit opposing players to 0. You can max 4 per game, and that kind of makes sure that you're not going to be seeing any lineups generated where you have a game stack, because that's not what we want to do in a best of 3 LCK, LPL slate. So I'm going to come in here and I'm going to go ahead and crunch just with those basic settings. I haven't done anything. I just want to kind of see where the field's going to be based on the projections and everything like that. Let's crunch. So I crunched 100 lineups just to kind of get a general idea. And it looks like we're getting a lot of T1 and a lot of LNG. So you can look at the team stacks tab here in Fantasy Cruncher and look at the combos here. So 32%, we have a 4 stack of T1 with a 3 stack of LNG. And then you have vice versa for 25%. So you're looking at 57% of your lineups are T1 and LNG. Now, a lot of the field could go down that route. But for me personally, let's look back at this sheet here. We see that T1 is the last game. We're not going to know their official lineups until 5 a.m. And at that point, we can't late swap. There's no late swap in League of Legends DFS. So you can't go in there like NBA where you set temporary lineups, and then when starters are released, you go back in and change it. You can't do that. So I want to avoid T1 or the Freaks in that last game. So by going back into the optimizer here, I want to bring up all. I'm going to go to teams. I'm going to select T1 here. Now I'm going to uncheck every position except for their team. Now look, as things go along and you start to recognize these names, a lot of times the players that start last time are going to start again. But for this, basically the first matchup here, I don't want to risk it. I'm going to avoid those teams. And if you don't want to risk it at all, you can do the same thing. And I'm going to do the same thing with the Freaks here. Used to be Afrika Freaks, but they changed their name. Now, let's uncheck everything but the team. And now, let's go ahead and re-crunch. Let's see what happens. So now, we're, like I originally thought, we're getting a lot of LNG and TES. Pretty much a majority of our lineups are going to be that. So let's look at the team stacks tab. Now that we have 100 lineups crunched, let's go into combos. And you see here LNG and TES account for, what is that, 72% of all of our lineups. Now, as we go along, we're going to start eliminating some players from our captain pool, and that's going to change things up. We're going to want to force the optimizer to force in more of these underdog matchups. The only teams we have at all so far are LNG, TES, and DRX. Now, I want to get some underdogs in here. I want to get a little bit of Rare Atom. I want to get a little bit of Ultra Prime. I want to get a little bit of Sandbox. And then I want to try to fit in some Freaks in the team spot as well, if we were to do 4-2-1 stacks. So the way I'm going to do that is I'm going to go in. I'm going to force the optimizer to do what I want. So let's look at the captain spot here, and let's look at which players are mostly in the captain spot. So Uwandi is a support, and we have 20% of him. Now, the reason why is because he's priced down, and it allows us to get these two teams together stacked. But I don't want a support at captain. Now, if I'm doing cash or if I'm doing head-to-heads, it's a little bit more reasonable to do that. But for a tournament, I really don't want to even have a support or a top, if I can help it, at captain. So let's go in and let's eliminate all the supports from the captain position. So we're at captain. Let me sort by position here. So you see ADCs up here at the top, jungler, mids. Let's go down to support, and I'm just going to eliminate all the supports from my player pool, all the supports at captain from my player pool. And obviously as well, we're gonna get rid of the teams as well. So now we're gonna crunch again, And what we're going to see, I can guarantee you, we're going to see more underdogs popping in, but we're also going to see a lot of tops at captain, most likely. Because we've eliminated the cheapest option at captain to get both of these teams together. So let's hit crunch and let's see what happens. So let's look at the captain here. It looks like we're getting a lot of DRX and LNG now, because DRX is going to be a little bit cheaper. Let's look at the captain spot. And this player, there's a jungler. The DRX jungler is 30% captain. And the TES top laner is the next highest owned. So remember, we're trying to target mids and ADCs at captain if we can. So I'm going to go in here. I'm going to make it easy. And I'm going to eliminate all the top laners except for the ones that are highly projected. So we're going to get rid of TES, top laner. We're going to get rid of... And as you can see, there's two tops for TES. There's actually multiple tops because we don't know the starters yet. So I'm going to get rid of pretty much all of these tops at captain, except for like 2, just because they have a higher projection. And then I'm actually going to limit it. You can't see it on my screen because I'm trying to hide the projection so I don't give away this proprietary information for paid subscribers. But there's a max amount of exposure, and I'm going to go ahead and put them to like maybe 10% each, so that I'm not stuck with a ton of top laners at captain. All right, let's crunch again. Okay, so let's check captain. So we're getting almost 40% jungler. What is that? Syosic, or whatever, however you pronounce that. Look, you could spend all day adjusting, tweaking, crunching, adjusting, tweaking, crunching. You can do this quite a bit. But for the sake of this video, I want to go in and I want to max out the amount of exposure I have in this team stacks tab. And in order to do that, go to advanced options, go into team stacks. Now I'm going to, so I adjusted the crop here so you guys can see this, but basically I'm going to limit TES and I want to limit LNG in both the 4 stack and the 3 stack. So let's start with the 4 stack. If I limit LNG to 30% in the 4 stack side of things, TES to 30%, and let's go DRX. Okay, now we're spreading ourselves out. Let's do the same thing over here in the 3 stack. Now these are just numbers I'm throwing off the top of my head here, but I want to see what happens. I want to see if we can get a couple of these other teams in here, some of these underdogs, because like I said, if you're stacking the underdog and the underdog sweeps a team, you're going to be in first place. Like, it's going to happen because not a lot of people are doing that. All right, so now we're starting to see some Sandbox here. We got a player from Sandbox. We're starting to see some Rare Atom mixed in. So our portfolio of 100 lineups is starting to see a little bit of variation. And we're starting to see a little bit of RA at 7% in the 4 stack, a little bit of Sandbox. We're starting to see 5% Rare Atom in the 3 stack. That's what we want to see. Now it's up to you to determine how crazy you want to get with these underdogs, but I want to be spread out. If all the favored teams win, you might not profit, but majority of the time out of the 4 different games, out of the 4 different matches, you're going to see one upset typically or more. So I want to be set up for that. So here we see we're getting a lot of different combinations of teams. That's what we want. Let's look at our captain again. Now we still got the jungler there at captain, which is okay. Tarzan is a jungler. These are the teams that are going to be more expensive because their odds of winning are much higher. But when you get down to these underdogs, you're going to notice Envy is an ADC because he's on an underdog and they're priced down. So you get your underdogs in. You try to spread out your exposures on these teams. You're not going to hit every night, but when the underdogs win, you will be set up well to hit a first place. So for me tonight, like I said, I want to avoid that last LCK matchup when it comes to actual position players. And if I'm doing any 4-2-1 stacks, I'll only focus on the team from that matchup. And this is the beginning of the season, so there could be some upsets. I'm going to try to get some Ultra Prime in. I'm going to try to get some Rare Atom, try to get some Sandbox. I'm not going to overwhelmingly have those teams, but what you want to try to do, if you're stacking top esports in the 4 stack, try to stack them with an underdog. Try to throw in Sandbox, try to throw in Ultra Prime. Same with LNG. If you're doing LNG in the 4 stack, try to get a Rare Atom or try to get Live Sandbox. Or you could do it vice versa. If you wanted to have an underdog in the 4 stack and then put a heavy favorite in the 3 stack, that works as well. So I know this was a little bit long-winded and I didn't cover every single possible thing because this would be too long of a show. But look, if you have any questions, feel free to join our Discord. I'll have the link in the description. Just to sum it up here, we want to heavily rely on stacking. We want to target ADC, mids, and maybe junglers, depending on the salary, at captain. We want to focus on 4-3 stacks, 4 players from one team, 3 players from another team in another game. Or you can do a 4-2-1, 4 players from one game, 2 players from a different game, and 1 team. And you want to try to force the optimizer to fit by capping or eliminating certain positions at captain, or however you want to do it, capping them in the stacking tab, however you feel best to do that. The bottom line is you want to try to get some exposure to pretty much all the underdogs, even if it's just one lineup, because we've seen some crazy stuff happen with League of Legends where the underdogs can absolutely pull out a sweep and absolutely destroy the slate. Another good strategy is to enter a single entry and use the chalkiest stacks as possible. So in your single entry, use a TES and LNG stack. And then in all of your tournament lineups, find a way to have an underdog matched up with a favorite in pretty much every lineup as best as you can. That way, if you completely bomb and all the favorites win, you at least still have that single entry that can maybe break you even or maybe only lose a little bit. But you'll be surprised how often these underdogs actually win. And you'll be surprised how often the underdogs can sweep the other teams too. So this should be a good introductory video to get you guys started on League of Legends DFS with Draftkings. If you have any further questions, hit us up in our Discord, on Facebook, Twitter. In our Discords, I will be posting up this sort of bird's eye view of the slate as often as I possibly can. This kind of gives you guys a good idea. If you don't have projections or if you don't have time to look up the odds, this will give you a good idea as to which teams will be the chalkiest just by looking at the odds and just by looking at the kills. So if I mess up a name of a position or if I messed up some terminology for League of Legends, don't kill me in the comments. Like I said, I don't know anything about League of Legends, the game. I know how to watch it. I kind of know who's winning. I can kind of figure out where that's at, but I've never played the game. But I've gotten, I don't know, 10 first places in the last year and a half or so. And I built up my bankroll enough playing League of Legends DFS so that I can go and lose it all in NFL Showdown. All right, guys. Well, thank you so much. Hit the like button, subscribe, and we will see you guys later.